I think we could put something together like that. Today we chose to talk a little bit about the replacement heifer module. I think it's a pretty neat module because it gives you a lot of flexibility and choices on what you can do. As always, when you start brands, going in and putting in the producer's name, either if it's a new producer, click on new producer, add that producer. I already added this one. I called it Harvey County just because it was something I was working on the other day. And click save once you get that producer's name typed in. As you probably learned, Rachel, it takes, probably depending on your computer's power, a while to go through this sequence. I think what it's doing is probably checking, if you're putting a new producer in, it's adding a, building the folder system and everything for it. So, okay, file saved. Since we're working on a replacement heifer, in this scenario we had a producer call, has 20 replacement heifers that he's going to breed this spring. If we look at this situation, we need to probably, whenever I'm offered this question, I will ask that producer what his mature cow weight is. As you have probably dealt with some producers, most of them probably don't have an exact idea. In this situation, that producer did have some cull cow receipts. Those cull cows, on average, weighed around 1250. So that's what we're going to use for our mature cow weight. Something I also put on here is when he gets to breeding, he wants those replacement heifers to weigh 55% of their mature weight at breeding. And so I've changed that in the target development weight. From there, the one thing that I didn't list on here, but the producer, well, we'll move into that that module. So from there, we would click in. Well, let's check our feeds. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. I wanted to work through this one a lot like what it would have been if I was actually doing this one right now today. But from a feed stuff standpoint, I basically left the list pretty standard to what we normally have. Basically using a 15% alfalfa, which would be our late bloom. We need to clear these out and add new ones. We also use native range, which will be much easier to find once we get all this streamlined. There we go. We're still going to call this winter, even though in the latter part of this feeding period we probably start to see some green up possibly, especially if there's any cool seasons in there. Also has availability of DDGs. We might need to add some energy, so we're going to throw some corn in this ration. One thing, Rachel, and Justin's on here now, that I typically always have corn and soybean meal in my feed library just in case I need to tweak something. That way I don't have to go back and add it. And brome hay was the last thing we were going to add. And we'll just call it a pretty standard brome hay at 10%. And once we're done entering our feeds, didn't need to modify anything to be custom. We'll click on heifer module on the top to make sure it saves those. And now here we are in the heifer module. I've called this heifer 1. That's what it was called when I set it up. Right now we're looking at feeding them from now until when we're going to breed. or start the breeding season. The neat thing about this module I like is it basically will give you the timeline of their first 3 years or first 2 years of life from birth to calving. And the nice thing about that is if you tweak the numbers, you can set them up and know, when you're going to breed, and that can help you in figuring out your feeding periods from March to May, like we're doing here. This group producer said that they were born in March, middle of March of last year on average. He'd like to breed them at 14 months of age. We've got that entered there. Depending on the type of cow he has, or cow herd base he has. I put medium because remember we customized that to the 1250 mature weight. Breed type, I almost always use British higher milk in this day and age with the genetics that have been used. If they are lower milk, you're still hedging and you build a little buffer in there. They're in good enough condition at 5 right now. Pretty average was what the producer said. Current weight 550. If we go back to what we talked about at the 55% of mature weight at breeding, that calculates out to this number right here of 688 pounds. That's what they need to be at in 2 months. They're at 550 right now. Weight spread, it depends on the genetics of the cow herd and variation there. That weight spread, I put 50. If there's a lot of variation in this group of heifers, he probably needs to put 100 or a bigger number there. All the stuff up here from a spec standpoint, production stage, they're growing cattle. All this stuff's pretty standard. And you may have to change some of it depending on the year. We haven't had too much rain, so hair coat or those type of stuff is really not going to have to change. So we start getting into maintenance adjustment. If we need to, this is just like the cow module. If we really want to, we already have this set up and saved, but say we get into a really nasty cold snap here at the end of March and we need to add a couple % to the diet. I don't know if we're going to get that picky, but we have that ability here. Group size, I said 20 head. This is only going to matter if we go into formulating a batch. It's going to take that batch number and equate how much we need to feed for the group per day. Typically, I formulate just under 1 and multiply it myself in the end. Target weight gain. Out here to the right of this box is what it's going to take to get from our current weight average to the weight we're trying to hit here in that feeding period. So I took the breeding season starting date. That's what we put in here for this example. 688 comes out they need to gain 2.22 pounds per day to hit our target weight. Okay, from there, all of our feeds came in correctly from the looks of it. We've talked quite a bit on all of the issues and positives and negatives, including waste in there. It really, once again, it all depends on how it's going to be fed. We'll leave that alone for now. The base diet in this scenario is going to be native winter range. So we have 550 pound animal, and we're going to start out trying to figure out what their dry matter intake is going to be. So I'm going to guess it's probably going to be a little lower than 2% on this diet, but I'm going to go ahead and use 2% to start just to figure out where we're at. And so that's going to be 11 pounds thereabouts. With this low quality forage, it's not going to be that high. As we can see, our dry matter intake as a % of weight is at the 1.5 is probably what we would expect on dry winter range. Now, once we start adding protein back into here, that's going to go back up. And so first thing I'm going to do is probably see what we can do by just substituting a portion of what that we would expect them to consume range-wise with brome hay. If we look back over playing the trial and error scenario, we increased the protein quite a bit in the diet. We're not anywhere close to meeting their requirements, but at the same time has also increased their dry matter intake, which is a good thing. Okay, right now we've still got close to 4.5 pounds that we can add into this diet. Obviously, we're a long way from meeting the requirement needs to get the gains that we're trying to accomplish. So with that, in this scenario, let's just say we threw in 3 pounds of corn and just trial and error like I would at any other time, 1 pound of soybean meal. Going back to the where we're at, if we're meeting what we need to, we're still a pound shy on intake, so that's good. We're almost meeting the requirements energy-wise, but we're still shy from a metabolizable protein standpoint. So if that's the case, let's try to, we've got a pound to play with, so I'll go 3.5 on the corn and 1.5 on our soybean meal, and we're almost getting to where we need to meet the requirements to get that 2.2 pounds per head per day. Probably bump up our brome hay 1/2 pound. We're reasonable on intake at 101%. We're still a little shy on protein, and then we're meeting our at a net energy, or from an energy basis, we're meeting those requirements. So we probably need to go back and tweak this a little bit. It probably just has to deal with changing this number to we add a little more soybean meal into the diet and went from there. So what would we do from here? You know, if that's what the producer, I would probably print this out and have the producer feed a supplement that was a soybean meal corn mix mixed at this ratio here at basically 5 pounds per head per day under this scenario. Typically, I give them options. If we can get some prices on that stuff, we can start looking at a cost per head per day here, which is probably pretty beneficial when we start looking at least cost. That's how I would do that. If we wanted to, we could probably start over again. And I'm going to go ahead and leave the native winter range at 6. I probably should have saved that last one. Justin, did you want to add anything?
Carl, can we see your inputs again up there on the top part of the screen? I didn't catch all those.
Yep.
Thanks.
Sure. So we're back. I left native alone. Let's just add, let's say we've got plenty of alfalfa. Let's go that route. Trial and error getting those back up. Not even close on the time. Let's try. Not really accomplishing what I would like to accomplish here. I'm not sure if Justin or Sandy have had a whole lot of luck just using alfalfa hay in this scenario. Probably with the replacement heifers, it's probably not going to be enough. If you've got plenty, we could, to keep it simple, I try to keep as few ingredients as possible in the diet. We might have to keep going here. We're still shy on metabolizable protein, but we're fine on DIP requirement. Justin, you want to chime in there and see, do you have an opinion on that?
What was your question again there, Carl? I've got Brittany Howell here in my office, and we were trying to get her squared away in the program.
Okay.
With the DIP at 177.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, that's when you go into equating metabolizable protein, we should be higher than that, shouldn't we?
Carl, I know I'm not the nutritionist here, but
No.
this is what I've kind of picked up from some other folks. And if we've got, if we scroll clear over to the right of the screen that we can't see now, and it will show us actually how many grams of we can see how much we're excess, and if we had enough, trying to remember what their rule of thumb was, but if we had enough excess of one fraction, then we would say it was okay. I'd have to go back and pull up my NRC program, and maybe Brittany has got something to add there if she's down there with Justin. I'm going to go look at my copy of the program so I can see I need to see the headings as well as the values below.
Well, we'll go back to that, Sandy. I've run into this before. When you look at total crude protein in the diet, this is probably another conversation for later, but I'll move on. Let's just say we're once again going to our base, native winter range. Let's just say we're going to go ahead and feed 4 pounds of dried distiller grains. Which is probably, without having a test or knowing where it is from a sulfur standpoint or fat standpoint, 4 pounds is probably as high as I would want to go with the growing animal. If we had those values, we could go a little higher. From an energy standpoint, we're doing really well here. Once again, we're going to be shy on the DIP side with the distiller grains. Okay. So to me, if we just go back for our original goal to get the 2.2, it was probably easiest to do with some kind of rolled corn native mixture. Didn't quite get that done as well as I would liked with the brome hay or the alfalfa hay. Rachel, do you have any questions at this point, or Joni? Okay. What I'm going to try to do is get back to where I was, where I had one that worked really well, and then work through the process of looking at the ration summary. Sandy, if you're there and can chime in on this, how well is this going to work with the viewing my screen? Will it just work like it normally would, or is it going to have problems?
When you print those, I think you can do it, Carl. We'll try it. If we don't see something, we'll let you know.
Sounds great. Well, let me finish getting this back to where we were. I can't remember if I had I did have a little bit of brome hay on here. Alright, well, I didn't get back to the exact same one I did because I didn't save it or write it down like I should have. So first thing I'm going to do on this one is go in here and label it ration 1 and click save so I don't screw up like I did once before. And one thing you can do once we get these looking, or we're comfortable where the numbers are and we think that's what the producer wants, you can go down to Ration Summary, click on that. It's going to formulate that. And here we have a printout that we can give them that shows them what we came up with and the performance we should expect from that ration.
You might just zoom on that some, Carl, because we're seeing the full page and it might be helpful.
That better?
Yeah, I think that's helpful, and then
Oops.
You can scroll down to the bottom slowly for them.
One thing I didn't do here, I'm going to close out of this and go back. When you go to print these, to me it just makes it simpler. If we're working on a group that's an average of 550 pounds, you know, I would just show those here, especially for the printout. It just takes a few, some of the numbers away and just simplifies it a little more. That way you'll only have those numbers there. If we had accurate prices in, especially with what the producer's dealing with, right here we'll have a ration cost per ton. And we can also look at some feed cost per head per day. A lot of producers ask for that. Typically I just start plugging and chugging, getting different numbers in here, mixes, different rations, and try to give them options to what will work for them. The one thing I really like about that is when we get to a point of, well, maybe they couldn't get distiller grains, and instead if I give them multiple options, they may not call me and I have to start all over again or go back and redo these. They have options, they have choices, and they can go from there. I was a little overfeeding a little bit from the amount of feed I delivered. That could be tweaked. If you remember going back to it, we're actually doing a little bit better on gain. So they'll eat what they can consume, or what they'll reach the satiety and not be hungry anymore. But since we're overestimating on average daily gain from what we wanted, we're going to be fine there. All I'd have to do is go back and change the numbers. Once you use the Heifer module a few times, I think it works out pretty well. I really like the calculator that's built into it, and that way you don't have to go in and figure out all those dates. calculating 14 months from birth, where you're at now, how many days you have, how many pounds you need to feed. Pretty powerful, but I think a fairly simple module, at least from a using standpoint, and you can get a lot out of it. Going from there, remember when we entered, we had 20 head, so we could have a batch mix sheet built in or printed out for this producer. He's got his own mixer. He's going to put all this together. We're going to mix on batch size. He wants to know how much to mix in each batch per ton. I use 50% increments there. Oops, excuse me. There we go. Well, number one rule, always click out. Basically, if he was going to grind his brome hay and also add the soybean meal corn mix or add those individually, he'd know what to do on a per ton basis there. Or if his Supreme mixer handles 3,000 pounds or 2 tons, he has those options there. Okay, any questions from the group? Justin, is there anything you'd like to add to that I've missed?
On that custom batch, those are scale weights, right? That's what actually goes in to the mixer. You just might remind everybody
Yes.
of that.
Okay.
And I logged on late. Did you reset in the settings for the 55% at breeding, or?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
What Justin was at or mentioned, there's back in settings. I'm not sure if Joni caught this or not. The mature cow weight of the herd we're dealing with was 1250, so I went in and changed that here and changed the medium mature cow weight to 1250. And you can also set the target development weight of where you want your replacements to be as a percent of mature weight down on the bottom of that page. And this producer was looking at about 55% of mature weight. Are there any questions about this module? I was trying to keep it simple because I was going to try to work through it from scratch and not really have it set up too much. Joni or Rachel, we already talked to Rachel a little bit about this. Joni, do you have any questions that don't pertain to this? Comments, ideas? That's a good idea, Joni. If you're still anybody's not feeling comfortable with them, the best way to learn this software is just to use it. I mean, that's how our group has had to learn how to use it for the most part. We had a short basic training in the beginning, but we've learned quite a bit in the last 6-7 months about this program. It's probably way more powerful than we'll ever need, but as a whole, I think the group's pretty happy with the decision to go with it. One thing, Joni, I don't know if you caught the discussion in the beginning. Sandy mentioned this, and you can probably go I'm not sure. It's not really listed there. What we've talked about doing is trying to find a way to use brands more to help producers in the state. Ideas that have come out, some stuff that was done by Dale back in the day where he'd actually go sit in the county office, come to the county office and work with you. I guess sort of a tag team situation where producers could come in with questions, rations they needed to work out, and you can work side by side. That way you can learn the program, but at the same time we're helping the producers. Sandy had a great idea of possibly just setting up at the sale barn, you know, advertising that you're going to be there that day and provide a service there that day and help educate them on what they need to feed. And Sandy may want to add to that, but I think it's a pretty intriguing idea.
Well, one way to make it work this time of year, you know, in kind of bull sale season is, you know, there's a bull program in here, and, you know, what are you going to feed these when you get home? Let's look at how that meets their requirements and what you want those bulls to do. And, you know, who knows what, it's hard to tell what people's interest might be, but it sure be a way to try.
I think the bull sale's another good one, Sandy, because I think Justin and I were talking about this, and it's amazing how many people don't realize that a bull will consume as much as they will or need as much as they will. When we start talking about AAUMs and, you know, they just, and it may, you know, that managing that bull correctly, as everyone on this group knows, will pay dividends. And then you'll get your money's worth out of that bull. If you don't, well, you're shortchanging yourself, I guess. I don't really have anything else. You know, part of our goal on these little training modules were to throw out examples. That way you'd have the ability to try them before or after. We could work through them if you have questions that arise. You know, the nice thing about doing this as a group, we possibly met a conflict today because the size of the group's not as big as we would like, but you know, if one person has a problem, there's a good chance that everybody is either going to face that problem or has faced that problem already. And that way we can help everybody as a group and not spend as much phone time on an individual basis. Rachel, your question about the feed library to be reorganized, I could pass that question on to Justin. He and I are supposed to be working on that. We have not done that yet, but I would say probably in the next week or so we'll probably get that redone. And then I'm not sure exactly how it's going to be redistributed to y'all. I think it'll be pretty easy process to do, but very soon would be my answer. Joni, we'll send out the link to the recording of this.
Rachel, we're in the process of going through that feed library right now, so I would say within the next, probably, it'll take a little while to get it out to everyone, but we're working on it.
Is this